Cheap Tickets wants to thank you for defending our country all over the world. Cheap Tickets wants to help you take a trip of your own. We believe the best trips in life are cheap. And as a proud supporter of the U.S. military, they want to offer you flights, hotels, car rentals, and even event tickets for less because you deserve it. Visit cheaptickets.com/military and take 18% off hotels. Offer is valid for active duty service members, veterans, military reserves, and the National Guard. Cheap Tickets thanks you for your service. cheaptickets.com/military. Now more than ever, you need reliable news you can count on. Since 1861, Stars and Stripes has been committed to bringing you the news without the spin. We believe in the First Amendment, and we're damn proud to have been there alongside you wherever you were deployed, keeping you connected. Today, we're only a click away. Go to stripes.com, use promo code podcast, and get 50% off your subscription. 50% off. There are some folks out there that think Stars and Stripes is a little old-fashioned. Well, folks, maybe right now, we need a little old-fashioned. Go to stripes.com and get reconnected with a legacy of news without the spin. Stripes.com.
Dude, there's a f***ing drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing! Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at that, man! Look at it fly!
The Department of Defense and the military departments take any incursions by unauthorized aircraft into our training ranges or designated airspace very seriously and examine each report. This includes examinations of incursions that are initially reported as UAP, when the observer cannot immediately identify what he or she is observing. The audio you heard at the beginning of the show came from now declassified videos that were recorded by FA-18 Super Hornet pilots from the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group. Those videos have sparked not only a new public interest in unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, but have perhaps for the first time ever pushed the government to publicly acknowledge UAPs and their concern over, as they put it, quote, incursions into designated airspace. What does it mean for the Department of Defense to not only acknowledge their existence, but to set up a task force to detect, analyze, and catalog UAPs that could quite potentially pose a threat to U.S. national security? This is Military Matters. I'm Rod Rodriguez. UFOs have long been a staple of science fiction. Aliens and flying saucers, aerial technology that dwarfs that of anything man-made. For years, there have also been folks who claim that UFOs exist beyond the realm of fiction, that they have seen these craft with their own eyes, claims that the government has been in possession of crashed UFOs, that these flying saucers exist, and that that existence could lead to bigger questions about our place in the universe. Up until recently, UFO footage was captured by folks with shaky cameras, grainy resolution, and the ever-popular doctored footage that resembles something closer to a D-list movie special effect. But all that changed in 2017, when video footage was publicly released that was recorded by Navy fighter pilots with their sensors. This wasn't someone's VHS recording from a backyard birthday that happened to catch a UFO in the background. This was video captured by targeting sensors, devices that could keep up with the flying object, detect heat, speed, and trajectory. But most important were the people behind the sensors, trained naval fighter pilots with real-world experience, expertise in identifying targets with their eyes and interpreting their sensors' data. This is as credible as you can get. Not long after the videos were released, the story behind those videos began to gain lots of traction. One of the pilots who captured that video, Commander David Fravor, his story began to make the media rounds, even making an appearance on the most popular podcast in the world, The Joe Rogan Experience. The story he tells is remarkable, but it's also one that is remarkably short. He's no nonsense and tells you the facts of what he saw that day. Up until August 4th, the government had bounced back and forth about the existence of committees or task forces assigned to study UAPs. First, there were no investigations. Then there had been, but it was disbanded in 2012. And then there might still be. The U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee, perhaps spurred by the Navy UAP footage, included in the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021, quote, directs DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, in consultation with the Secretary of Defense and the heads of such other agencies as the Director and Secretary jointly consider relevant, to submit a report within 180 days of the date of enactment of the Act to the Congressional Intelligence and Armed Services Committees on Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, also known as anomalous aerial vehicles, including observed airborne objects that have not been identified, end quote. The bill has not yet been passed. As of August 4th, the Navy will have stood up the UAP task force. That task force will perhaps be taking the reins from the Advanced Aerospace Threat Intelligence Program, or AATIP, which was acknowledged to have been a U.S. government study into UFOs, but disbanded in 2012. I wanted to know more about what it was that AATIP had found. Why is the government suddenly willing to talk about UAPs or UFOs? And like other veterans and service members, my thoughts about this were less about the sensational stories behind the video and more about the intent of whoever's behind the stick of one of those flying discs. So I talked with Luis Elizondo, the former director of the Aerospace Threat Intelligence Program. He resigned from his Pentagon post in protest of government secrecy, and because, as he stated in his resignation letter to then U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis, that his research was not being taken seriously.
Who am I? Who is Luis Elizondo? I would submit to you, look in the mirror if you want to answer that. I'm you. I'm her. I'm everybody who's ever put on a uniform to serve their country. I'm no different. Some people think that I'm coming out and, I'm a whistleblower or I'm leaking information. I'm neither of those. I'm not trying to embarrass the U.S. government. I'm not trying to provide information that's sensitive or classified in an unauthorized manner to the American people in the world. That's not what this is about. I am simply continuing the very mission that I was given back in 2008 and then later on in 2010. I'm just finishing the mission. I'm seeing it to its logical conclusion. It just so happens to be that I was in some assignments that exposed me to some very extraordinary moments in history, and I'll leave it at that.
So what was the Department of Defense's Aerospace Threat Intelligence Program? Was it all UFOs and UAPs?
The bottom line is I was part of a very small group of individuals at the Pentagon where we looked at unidentified aerial phenomena. And in the vernacular, they call them UFOs. Now, before we start going into the, raised eyebrows and giggles and snickers, let's talk about what that means, okay? So you have a defense apparatus, one of the most premier, if you will, organizations on the planet that's paid billions of dollars each year to identify potential threats, right? And from an aerial perspective, that includes aircraft, that includes helicopters, that includes drones, cruise missiles, ICBMs, you name it. We are paid a lot of money to figure out just what it is. And in this particular case, the organization I belong to, we focused on those things that fell outside of that parameter, things that truly were unidentified. They were behaving in ways that simply we can't understand. They're flying at hypersonic velocities, not supersonic, hypersonic velocities. They're dropping in out of 80,000 feet, hovering over the water, 50 feet above the water, then popping back out into low Earth orbit. We're talking about things that apparently can fly not only in our atmosphere, but possibly underwater and even in a vacuum environment like outer space, with the same performance characteristics, but not compromising the performance characteristics or their design characteristics, right? So there were these observables, 5 observables that we noticed that really didn't fit neatly within any parameter of conventional type technology.
The 5 observables Mr. Elizondo is referring to are hypersonic velocities, transmedium travel, instantaneous acceleration, low observability, and positive lift, or you might think of it as anti-gravity.
So, for example, if you were to think of a cruise missile, you might have a foreign adversary developing a cruise missile with hypersonic technology, but there's always a compromise. Just because you can go, Mach 5 or faster doesn't mean you can stop on a dime, pivot, and move 90-degree angles, right? So that you might expect a helicopter to be able to do that, but not a hypersonic cruise missile. And yet these objects were able to perform in ways that really fell outside our normal conventional understanding of aerodynamics. And furthermore, this information was being backed up by our brave men and women in uniform, trained observers. A lot of money is invested. You are a critical observer. You look at things through a slightly different optic than most people because you've been trained that way. On top of that, you have electro-optical data and gun camera footage that's backing up the same observations. And oh, by the way, you have the radar data as well. So you have 3 different collection sensors. One's a human sensor and the others are technical sensors, all recording the same object at the same time, at the same place, doing the same things. So once you realize that this is indeed real, whatever that is, it is real, then one has to then take that question to the next level. And as an investigator, my background, former special agent and counterintelligence, we are trained to look at things like you, maybe a little bit differently, and try to ascertain, is this some sort of super secret, advanced foreign technology that may be being used against us from a surveillance or a reconnaissance perspective? Or is this something that we fundamentally really just have never come across before?
Aircraft that do things nothing in our most advanced arsenal can do, witnessed by trained, objective, even skeptical military personnel. But what were they looking to do with this data? Was the goal simply to find the unexplainable or find explanations?
As this information is coming in, our hope was always to find a conventional answer. We don't like not having an answer. Unknowns are not good, right? Strategic surprise is terrible. So when you're going in and you're looking at something, you're going in with the hope and understanding that I'm probably going to find a logical explanation from this. It's an artifact, for example, on the camera, or it's a lens flare, or it's, whatever these other thousands of things it could be. Pick your solution du jour. But again, when you have something that is falling outside those normal parameters, you have something flying in the sky, it doesn't have wings, it doesn't have any obvious signs of propulsion, has no control surfaces, has no cockpit, no lights, no rivets, and it's still able to somehow defy the natural effects of Earth's gravity, then you're kind of saying, okay, what are we dealing with here? Well, okay, maybe it's a balloon, a lighter than air object, buoyancy, right? It could be some sort of balloon object. Well, okay, but balloon objects don't typically travel at 3,500 miles an hour. Okay, well, let's scratch that. Could it be some sort of new advanced type of reconnaissance capability, right? And so you kind of go through this whole mental checklist of try to figure what this something could be. Is there any other technology that we have right now that we can compare this to? And at the end of the day, when you come up with a big goose egg all along that entire list, that's when AATIP would really start to get engaged.
No wings, no signs of propulsion, no lights, no rivets, and flying with speed and agility we can't replicate. We can't pin the craft to another country's experimental planes program, and it's not a lens flare or swamp gas or any other explainable means. This is physically real, and it's been captured on film, and it's witnessed by credible persons. So if it's not from anyone we know on Earth, is this proof of extraterrestrials? We get an answer when we come back from the break. Cheap Tickets wants to thank you for defending our country all over the world. Cheap Tickets wants to help you take a trip of your own. We believe the best trips in life are cheap. And as a proud supporter of the U.S. military, they want to offer you flights, hotels, car rentals, and even event tickets for less because you deserve it. Visit cheaptickets.com/military and take 18% off hotels. Offer is valid for active duty service members, veterans, military reserves, and the National Guard. Cheap Tickets thanks you for your service. cheaptickets.com/military.
Let me preface this first by saying, people ask me all the time, what do you think? And my response has always been, it doesn't matter what I think. My job as an investigator is simply to collect the truth and speak the truth. I collect the evidence and I present it to the jury. In this case, you're the jury. The American people are the jury. Does this mean that there isn't a country out there that has somehow to manage to leapfrog ahead of us over the last 20 years and has remained a complete and total secret out of the eyes of the U.S.? Sure, but then can you imagine what an intelligence failure that would be, right? That would probably be historically one of the worst intelligence failures ever for any country of all time. So it's really unlikely it's something that is foreign adversarial, but it's still a possibility. Now, the question is it extraterrestrial? Well, what does that mean? I've said before, this is a huge universe we live in, but we're now learning through quantum physics. You had the old paradigm of Newtonian physics, and then you had Einstein come along and provide his relativity, and that time and space is really kind of flexible and connected. And now you have this new type of physics called quantum mechanics. And although they seem diametrically opposed to each other, they all, for what they do, they answer very succinctly some of the mysteries of the universe. So is something from outer space? Well, could be, but it could be something else. I always say to people, it could be from outer space, inner space, or even the space in between. There may be options there we've never even considered, right? So we say, well, if it's not US technology and it's not adversarial technology, foreign technology, it must be from outer space. Not necessarily. There's a whole range of what ifs that lie. It's not just A, B, or C. I think you have an A, B choice, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and maybe even a combination of some of those. So it's hard to think about it that way. And I know it's very tempting for me to offer an opinion, but at the end of the day, I think it would be a disservice for me to do that. The one thing we learn early on is you can be absolutely sure of something and still be absolutely wrong. So, I don't want to be in that position to offer an opinion, because that opinion is an uninformed. I realize that my opinion, although I've been exposed to a lot of stuff, I still don't have all the data and facts. It's an uninformed opinion, and it would not be prudent for me to offer what Lou Elizondo thinks, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what Lou Elizondo thinks. What matters is what you think.
What can you think about any of this? The implications, and honestly, that's all we can do at this point, is imply, but the implications of an extraterrestrial craft or crafts operating over U.S. airspace, well, those go beyond U.S. national security. Those implications extend to what it means to be a human being on a tiny little blue planet floating in the darkness of space that turns out to be maybe not as lonely as it might first appear. But let's come back down to earth for a moment and think of what this means just for us, just as American citizens. These things flying around have demonstrated technological capabilities that are astounding to say the least, but are they a threat?
I don't know if it is a threat, but we have to presume it could be if it wanted to be, based upon its capabilities. We still don't know its intent yet, so there's an information gap. But let's just say hypothetically, yes, there are these patterns we've recognized. We have a pretty good understanding of maybe some of the things it might be interested in, which actually to some degree is not really dissimilar to some of our foreign adversarial interests. I should probably leave it at that, but I think we've been on the. I think publicly, I've already been quoted as saying there may be a nuclear connection, an interest in our nuclear capabilities, assets, and equities, and so I won't expound much beyond that, I guess.
These craft have technology that lends one to consider the question of what else do they have? These things are flying into the ocean and flying back out into low orbit above the Earth. What else can they do? So I pressed on. Have they demonstrated any clear acts of aggression?
When you talk about aggression, you have to look at motive. That there's a motive behind aggressive behavior. Threat, not necessarily. Let's say at night before you go to bed, just to be safe, I presume you still lock the front door at night before you go to bed. And let's say one night you may go as far as to check the windows and make sure they're locked, and you might turn the alarm on at night, and you go upstairs to go to bed, and you come down the next morning, and all of a sudden there are muddy boot prints in your living room. Now, no one's been hurt, nothing's out of place, nothing's been taken, but despite your front door being locked and your windows still being secure and your alarm being on, you've got muddy boot prints in your living room that were not there the night before. Is that a threat? My answer is, well, it could be if it wanted to be, so we better figure it out.
Is that a threat? Well, not exactly. Not a direct one. But the act can feel threatening, and that presence to me at least implies a dismissal of my rights, my security. It's a complete disregard for my privacy, which is a pretty scary experience. But that still didn't satisfy my question. So, using that analogy of muddy boot prints being discovered one morning, I wanted to know if we've seen something more than just evidence of potential threat. Have we seen these craft demonstrate weapons technology, a clear and present danger to whoever might present a threat to them?
A message and aggression are two different things. If you are, let's say you're in an F-18 Super Hornet and you're flying in your E model, just zipping around, and all of a sudden you see an object out there. Now, you know flight safety rules and regulations, right? And all of a sudden this thing comes screaming at you at, let's say, 2,000 miles an hour and comes within feet of your aircraft, of your wing. Clearly, that's a flight safety issue. Clearly, if it hits your aircraft, would be very much considered a threat, potentially a fatality even, right? Yet it didn't shoot at you. It didn't do anything to manipulate your sensor systems. It didn't either deactivate or activate your armament or your loadout. So it's a really tough question. I guess my point is I have my feelings about it, but I think it's too early to tell. And I definitely don't want to prejudice the jury by offering what I think, if that makes sense.
In that scenario, the UAP doesn't shoot the jet down, but it certainly made its presence known, and it performed in a way that could be perceived as a threat or a warning. But could it shoot the jet down? Does it have a weapon system?
Yeah, I unfortunately, because we're getting now into some specifics about potential capabilities, I cannot answer that. I'm not trying to be evasive. I can very quickly go down a road down here that can get me into some trouble. So I'll probably just leave that alone.
Mr. Elizondo has made some extraordinary claims. Even if he's not willing to jump to the conclusion of extraterrestrials, the fact that he's come forward to discuss a program that studied this phenomena and reached conclusions that there are aircraft that exist outside of the parameters of terrestrially explained, well, maybe he's either a crazy person or a whistleblower.
Look, I'm not a conspiracy guy. I spent my entire life with the TS clearance, and I was a special agent in charge of several different activities. I'm a no-nonsense guy. I often joke I couldn't even spell the word UFO before I got involved in the program. I was asked to join it. By the way, I never asked to be part of this effort. They came and found me. There are still elements in the Department of Defense that are not happy with me at all. And they have done a good deal of work trying to discredit me and disparage me. Fortunately, I also have some friends in the department still that know what I did and were there when I gave the briefings. So unfortunately, yeah, there's probably a little bit of sore feelings there and some retribution. But at the end of the day, I took an oath like you did to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And my allegiance is to my country and to the American people. It's not to politicians and bureaucrats. And that's just fact. I don't really give a damn what the bureaucrats think about this. What I care is what the American people think about this. And let's not fool ourselves. This is not a topic that belongs under the providence of any particular government or institution or religious organization. This is a topic that we need to have as citizens and maybe even as a species, because what we're dealing with is not something that can be classified. Now, sources and methods you can certainly classify, and our capabilities to neutralize or to detect or to track and all that stuff, I got it. Well, I'll never talk about that. But when you're talking about the fundamental topic of these things, the fact that they're in our skies, I tried very, very hard for a very long time to get the most senior levels of the DoD to do something about it. Let's not forget that at the time, Secretary of Defense James Mattis was a person I served in combat with. This guy's a hero. And if you've ever met him, you know that this is a man who wants more information, not less. So keeping this information from him, let's not forget that the taxpayers had paid us $22 million of hard-earned taxpayer dollars. Now, I know that may be budget dust to some people, but for me, every penny counts. The citizens are entrusting us to do a mission with their money, and we're having findings that need to be reported up the chain of command. But there were people in the chain of command, for whatever reason, didn't want to have the conversation because of stigma, taboo, political consequences, you name it, right? And so, ironically enough, in order to finish the mission they gave me in the first place, I had to leave the beloved department to do that. And unfortunately, yeah, I've had to suffer some of the consequences because there are some individuals that continue to just. And by the way, I'll put this out there right now. I am absolutely certain. The department has flip flopped on their position about 6 times in the last 3 years alone on this. There wasn't a program. Oh, there was a program. It didn't look at UFOs. Oh, now it did look at UFOs. And Lou was running it. No, Lou wasn't running it, and all this happy stuff in between. I am confident that this war of words is not over. I'm certain that there are some unfriendly elements that are going to continue to try to have salacious headlines and continue to try to bury this topic. Now, the good news is that we've got a lot of support finally from people in Congress, and potentially even now for the first time a sitting U.S. president. So you can squelch me, but you can't squelch the conversation. That cat is out of the bag. So if I get hit by a bus tomorrow by accident, this conversation is going to continue because we've reached a critical mass now where too many people know the truth. They've received the classified briefings. There you have it.
Since Mr. Elizondo's departure from his position at the Pentagon in 2017, he has since joined the organization To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, serving as its Director of Government Programs and Services. You might have heard of To the Stars Academy in the media because of its founder, former Blink-182 frontman, Tom DeLonge.
Yeah, so To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science is a small collective of individuals, mostly former governmental and intelligence personnel. We have CIA, DoD, Aerospace companies represented. We have some PhDs as well, and an incredible advisory board. And at the top of that, you have a very, very creative and maverick rock star named Tom DeLonge, former lead singer of a group called Blink-182. And this is an organization that is chartered with pushing this topic forward, understanding what this phenomena is, how it works, and if there's any benefit to us collectively as a society. Are there things we can learn, technologically speaking, that can help advance us? For example, the last time we had a real race with the Soviet Union was a space race. And as a result of the 10 years of the Apollo mission development, some 6,200 industries and technologies were developed of that just 10 years of research and development, to include Velcro and the LED light bulb and memory foam and CAT scans and these things that really have helped us out a lot. And are we at this precipice yet again? Are we at the point where there may be some new technologies that we never even considered, and yet they've been in front of our face this whole time, right? So that's one of the missions of TTSA. We have separate divisions. So in my division, it's very fact-oriented. Again, collect the truth, speak the truth. That's it. Fairly simple, straightforward. We have an aerospace division that's looking at the science and technology aspects, things that maybe we can partner with, both industry and our government friends, and certain critical key technologies, again, to help bring our servicemen and women in uniform back home safely. And then we have an entertainment piece, which is run by Tom DeLonge, which is basically socializing all of this under entertainment and, movie creative outlets such as movies and books to help socialize in a more of an entertaining type way the things that we're trying to do.
Last October, To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science entered into a Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, or a CRADA, with the U.S. Army Combat Capabilities Development Command, Ground Vehicle Systems Center, an agreement titled Novel and Emerging Technology Exploitation. The purpose of the CRADA is explained as, quote, the government would like to assess, test, and characterize the products from the collaborator, To the Stars Academy, at government facilities to compare the capabilities of those advancements to known commodities, understand what facilities would be required to produce the advancements, and determine their application for ground vehicle platforms. The CRADA goes on to describe the agreed-upon material technologies for U.S. government testing and evaluation as samples of mechanical and EM, electromagnetic, sensitive metamaterial, quantum communications, beamed energy propulsion, active camouflage, and directed photon projection. With all that said, what does this all mean? What does this mean for America's warfighters and Americans in general?
Well, I think we can't hold back the information anymore. technology has become so pervasive that YouTube is full of some very interesting videos, and there's only going to be more and more. So in the past, maybe it was to the advantage of a government to keep this sequestered, keep this secret, because if you don't have a solution, why would you offer a problem, an issue to your citizens, right? It's just like back, let's look at the old U-2 aircraft when we were flying them over Russia in violation of the treaty. And it was only after the Russians were able to successfully shoot down a U-2 did they admit that we were flying U-2s over their airspace, right? Why admit a problem if you don't have a solution for it, right? So I understand that, but now we're getting to the point where that same type of mentality can actually be counterproductive to a government, because now the longer you keep a hold of a secret that's really a bad secret, everybody at this point kind of knows something's there, then it looks like you're being insincere. It looks like you're keeping the truth from the American people. And so what was once an advantage to keep quiet is now turning into a disadvantage the longer you keep it. So then the question is, okay, well, how do you have this conversation with the American people that, you know, maybe there is something there, without necessarily having to go back and admit, yeah, we've always known it. You know, there's a lot of ridicule, stigma that's been associated with it. And now it turns out that, that the government did have a program. And how many people had put FOIAs before where the government said, we don't have a UFO program here. And it turns out you actually did. Well, you know, that's a problem, because now you're in violation of law. You know, when you're talking about a FOIA process, especially a program that in and itself was, portions of it were unclassified. So I think the timing of it, I don't know if it's necessarily engineered. I'm not going to go that far, because let's look at the 60s. We had racial issues then. We had the Vietnam War. We had women's suffrage. We had a hippie movement. We had all sorts of things going on, friction points, crisis points, flash points in our society. In order for a nation to learn and move forward, sometimes you have to go through these painful processes of growth.
I presented Mr. Elizondo with a scenario in which someone tells him, I believe those unidentified aircraft are in fact aliens. I don't care that you're telling me you don't know for certain that they are or are not. I'm telling you that I think they are, and that I'm scared. I'm scared of what they might do. I asked Mr. Elizondo, what would he say to that person?
My first response would be, there's a 50% chance you're right. And the second of all is, with every unknown comes opportunity. I think we need to remain cautious, but I'm not the kind of guy that if you look at a glass, I'm either a half glass empty or a half glass full. My response is, you have the wrong size glass to begin with. So when someone comes to me and they said, you know, I'm scared, I said, well, you know, I think some cautious approach is probably prudent. It's warranted. But as with everything we've seen throughout the history of mankind writ large, through times like this, sometimes you see the best of mankind. Sometimes you see the best of humanity. And there's an old cliche, but I think it's true. You know, it's always darkest right before the dawn. I think there's always silver linings in everything, and it depends how we look at things. Yeah, it can be scary. The unknown is scary. As a species, we've been trained to avoid the unknown at every turn, at all costs, because it's our survival. But the unknown isn't necessarily bad. It can be bad. It can be lethal, in fact, but not always. It can also be tremendous amount of promise and hope. So, you know, for those who might be fearful, I remain cautiously optimistic, to be honest with you. I prefer to look at it that way.
I reached out to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and they declined an interview, but they did provide me with some answers to my questions over an email. I asked the big question directly to them. Has the UAP task force confirmed the existence of non-terrestrial craft? Their answer was, quote, no, we have not made that confirmation. The investigation of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, sightings is ongoing, end quote. I asked, what misconceptions would you like to clear up about the nature of the UAPs and the UAP task force? Their answer was this, quote, incursions into our ranges and operating areas by any aircraft, identified or not identified, are problematic from both a safety and security concern. Safety of our air crews is paramount. Unauthorized and unidentified aircraft pose a risk to flight safety. Additionally, it is vital we maintain the security of our operations. Our aviators train as they fight. Any intrusions that may compromise the security of our operations, tactics, or procedures is of great concern. The department has established a UAP task force to gain knowledge and insight into the nature and origins of UAPs, as well as their operations, capabilities, performance, and/or signatures. The mission of the task force will be to detect, analyze, and catalog UAPs posing an operational threat to U.S. national security and avoid strategic surprise. I hope that as this story evolves, that if we are right now being visited by extraterrestrials, by another form of life from another planet with technology that dwarfs our own, that first contact will be peaceful, that will deviate from our own human history and get this one right the first time. I hope that it goes that way, and that whoever or whatever is controlling those aircraft don't decide to make a strategic surprise. Tell us what you think. We are on Twitter at StripesMMPod. Leave your comments and a review on Apple Podcasts. As always, go to stripes.com, use promo code podcast, and get 50% off your digital subscription. Folks, Stars and Stripes is on the chopping block. Reach out to whoever you think can make a difference. Put the message out there. Let the universe know that you want to keep the lights on at Stars and Stripes. While you're at it, let them know you want Rod Rodriguez to do the first podcast with an alien UAP pilot. We can't do that if they shut us down over some fiscal nonsense. Stars and Stripes has been there for you when you were deployed overseas, at sea, and where no other newspaper dared to venture. Stars and Stripes was there for you, and now they need you to be there for them. I'm Rod Rodriguez. I will see you at the next episode.